And at one point, at about 11 o'clock today, I realized I found myself like feeling room temperature. And I was sat there in shorts and a long sleeve t-shirt, and I was like, this is it. This is room temperature. This is the perfect temperature. And I was like, God, it's amazing.
You're like, if I
I
were a
couldn't
glass of
feel.
water, I would be so satisfying.
I was like, this is it. This is so comfortable. I don't know where. It's a joke from Community where they're like, some aircon repairman is like, it's John Goodman, unbelievably, and he's like, this is room temperature. And the character Troy is like, I can't feel where my body ends and the room begins. And I was sat there thinking, this is the most comfortable a temperature I've ever been. And I like when things are just a little bit colder. And then I realized I hadn't listened to a word the instructor had said in like 12 minutes. And we were talking about like what to do if somebody's choking, if you are going to administer first aid. And I was like, this seems really, really important. And I just sat there flicking through the thing. Hello and welcome back to Athlantic, the show where an American and a Brit take turns crossing the pond to learn about sports culture in the UK and the USA. I am your resident Brit, Harry Collins.
And I'm your resident American, Adam Jordan. Harry, I've noticed you have finally acquired a number 9 shirt that you can use for your little number tracking. And now both of your numbers happen to be World Cup winners. A lovely touch for this episode. Well done.
Adam, that is really, really well noticed. I went out of my way to buy a number 9 because Brighton haven't had a good number 9 for years. And I thought one of the best we've maybe ever had was the original Ronaldo. And you're right, as of last Sunday, Cucurella is also the World Cup winner, which is what we were going to be talking about in the body of today's episode. This is our World Cup retrospective. We're not going to talk so much about what happened on the pitch, although that is relevant. We're going to talk about our expectations and if they were met or sort of let down by the World Cup in America. Before we jump to that, our patron saint today, 39, happened to be quite a profitable, quite a rich number. I had 3 whole athletes I could have chosen. 2 of them were footballers, and we're going to spend a lot of time talking about football. So instead, I'm going to talk about Stuart Broad, who is, if you remember, in our 20th episode, we open the Athlantic Hall of Fame, where all of our patron saints sit on a slightly smaller pedestal away from our Hall of Fame inductees. I submitted James Anderson for the debut, the first Athlantic British submission to the Hall of Fame. Stuart Broad is James Anderson's best man. Stuart Broad is the jelly to James Anderson's peanut butter. They played almost an entire career together. Stuart Broad has the second most caps for an England player. He is the second highest England wicket taker. He is the second fast bowler to take 600 wickets in Test cricket. And he is second in all of those to his friend, James Anderson. Stuart Broad, he is a fast bowler. He's 6'5". He is now retired. He retired in 2023. And I think at some point we will do an episode on retiring and leaving the sport, and maybe part of today's conversation will be about some of the superstars that we lost at this World Cup or potentially lost at this World Cup. But I think every athlete who plays any sport, but specifically a team sport like cricket, wishes they could retire like Stuart Broad did, who against Australia in 2023 scored a 6 with the last bowl he faced and took a wicket with the last bowl he delivered. That's pretty cool. That's like
That's
a
poetic.
walk-off home run for your very last game. We didn't win the Ashes, but Stuart Broad sort of immortalized himself by scoring a six and taking a wicket with the last two balls of his career, which I think is really cool.
That is
If you
really
could
cool.
choose to retire, that's exactly how you do it. What a way of preserving your legacy. He's a good pundit now, and yeah, it's nice to have a non-soccer player from my side of the podcast
Well, you kind
for
of needed one
our.
for that number. Does Stuart Broad have as cool of a nickname as his bestie James Anderson?
I looked this up. It's not as good as the King of Swing.
Hmm.
Oh, it's Malfoy because he looks
No,
like Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter. It's not as good.
I
No, it's
I'm glad
actually
it's
comparatively it's terrible.
yeah. The answer to the question is a resounding no. But okay, well we'll leave the nicknaming to James Anderson and the fast bowling to Stuart Broad, who is I almost said Sir Stuart Broad, but why not? Okay, well, with that, we're gonna get into our next segment, which is our rulebook game. And if you're new here or aren't sure how it works, the rulebook game is where Harry and I each go to a random sport and we look through the rulebook and we try to stump each other and have the other person guess the sport based just on 5 rules that we pick in general in ascending order from broadest and most difficult to decipher to most specific. So by the time you get to the 5th rule, it should be pretty clear what the sport is. But I don't know if you and I have like fully run each other completely out without knowing yet. Maybe in the first one, but regardless, we both have one. I think I read last time first. So Harry, I think if you want to read and have
Sure,
me guess first, I'm more than
of
happy to
course.
jump onto the hot seat.
My first rule, my first rule today is rule 3.1. Well, actually, all of my rules come from 3.1.
Whoa.
Um, it was a particularly fruitful clause. Your first rule, 3.1.8. The use of any objects as an aiming device is strictly forbidden.
Bowling?
No, fair guess. I didn't give you much there. Rule 3.15. When a player is addressing the ball in readiness to play or in the process of playing a shot, all other players in the group should comply with the following: be stationary and quiet until the player has completed his or her stroke.
It sounds a lot like golf, but I'm going to guess that's not it.
Is that your guess?
Sorry, it's golf. I just think
Oh,
you're giving me a red herring.
it's not golf.
Okay. What is
3117.
that?
A ball is deemed to have been holed when it comes to rest in the cup. If a ball enters the cup and then bounces out again, it is deemed not to have been successfully holed.
Is it foot golf?
No, that's such a good guess. And I'm not giving you much. That's such a good guess. I think this one should give it away. 313. A ball in play may only be moved by a stroke of the putter. It can only be
Oh
played
my
from a position of
god.
rest.
Oh my god. It's mini golf.
It is the British Mini Golf Association who lend their rules to the World Crazy Golf
I
Championships.
don't
Your
know.
final clue was 3116. If, and this was so good, if a ball comes to rest inside a pipe, it must be repositioned up to 20 centimeters from the exit of said pipe. No penalty can be incurred.
That's crazy. Also, the
Good
fact that
guess.
it's the British rules makes me think that the American rules have like some sort of rules on like windmills and stuff. But the fact that that was a personality guess. I should have gotten that on the second go. I went with foot golf because I know you. I feel like had I gone in blind, I feel like knowing each other sometimes hurts us on these. But that was really good, especially because that second one was just like it was so obviously golf. And well done, well done. All right, well, we'll see if I'm as nice, creative, or mean.
Yeah, lay it on me.
Let's see. All right, your first rule is Rule 2.3.b. There is no limit to the number of players who are permitted to be substituted at the same time, or to the number of times any player is permitted to substitute or be substituted.
Dodgeball.
Incorrect. That'd be crazy if you got that on the first guess. Rule 9.7. Players may stop, receive, and deflect or play the ball in a controlled manner in any part of the field when the ball is at any height, including above the shoulder, unless this is dangerous or leads to danger.
Deflect only makes me think more of dodgeball. Um, um,
On the second,
Australian rules football.
it is not Australian rules football. Perhaps on the second guess, you could have gotten dodgeball, and I would have given it to you. Rule 4.7. The ball is spherical, hard, and white, or an agreed color which contrasts with the playing surface.
Gaelic football.
Incorrect. Rule 2.2. No player may wear protective headgear except a face mask when defending a penalty corner.
Handball?
Incorrect. One more to go.
Oh,
I was hoping that last one would give it away. Rule 4.6. The stick has a traditional shape with a handle and a curved head, which is flat on its left side.
it's field hockey, isn't it?
It is field hockey indeed.
Ah, you
Very well
know what?
done. You got there at
That
the end.
really the. Can you reread the second one for me?
Players may stop, receive, and deflect or play the ball in a controlled manner in any part of the field when the ball is at any height, including above the shoulder, unless this is dangerous or leads to danger.
For some reason, with deflect, I got hyper focused on this is a game that you play with hand to ball without like a stick or a racket. I really put myself down a cul-de-sac there. Very good. I should have got field hockey. Funnily enough, funnily enough, because I've just spent about 45 minutes on his Wikipedia today, I can tell you that Stuart Broad was very good at field hockey and played as played as a goalie for a long time. So I can't
Wow.
believe I've so quickly disappointed our patron saint. Uh, Moving forward and now immediately looking backwards
Which is
on Monday morning, I sent you a long and meandering voice note.
yeah.
Trying to
Quick aside here. For anybody that doesn't know, Harry and I communicate in like real life because we are, believe it or not, friends. We communicate in real life almost exclusively through voice note, and these can be quick, but more often, I'd guess our average is like around like 8-9 minutes, but it frequently goes above
yeah.
that.
I one of these voices, and often we try to compress as many different topics in as we can, and it can become challenging to remember exactly what part of three different conversations we're having when you're kind of updating each other instead of having a passive conversation. But on Monday, I remember sending probably about a 7-minute voice note, and it was about nothing except for my mourning the end, my actual grief for the end of the World Cup, a sports event that comes around once every 4 years. the continental competitions that we have for the Euros, the CONCACAF, the Africa Cup of Nations, they they scratch a similar itch, but they are not they do not replace or replicate fully the feeling of the World Cup. So when it's here, we have to enjoy it, and I think we are indebted to recognize and reflect on a World Cup that has been so wonderfully enjoyed, and of course in this most Atlantic um, way, a sport that was born in my country and now has been um, elevated to this pedestal in yours. Not for the first time. America has hosted it more times than England has now, having previously hosted in 1994, following which the Major League Soccer was launched a couple of years later. So today we're going to talk about our expectations for this World Cup, if they were met or if they fell short, what it probably means for football, the next World Cup, and maybe soccer in America as well. And we're going to do this through a couple of different categories. We're going to talk about what happened on the pitch, off the pitch, format changes, and then I want to finish this conversation with what, for you as our resident American, what do you think maybe America learned from the World Cup, and vice versa? Because this whole 4.5 week, almost 5 week competition was an amazing inspection of American sports culture by the rest of the world. But equally, we saw, the world arrive on America's doorstep. And I think some of the American response to Scotland taking over Boston and, the Orange Army descending on Dallas, I think in a really almost personal way, different sports cultures from different countries have now injected themselves into America and left a lasting legacy. All of that is to say, Adam, very broadly, are you proud of the World Cup's hosting in the US? I think this is a very pointed question. I think there are multiple layers to this. I have distilled my thoughts, but do you think, are you proud of the job that your nation did hosting the biggest sports event in the world?
That is a yes or no question, which simply cannot be answered with one word. Um, Definitely mixed. I mean, I pride is an interesting way to think about it, because I never like considered it from am I proud that my home country pulled this off, or how they pulled it off. Um, I mean, the cop out answer is yes and no. I think you saw a lot of the build up to the World Cup and a lot of the realities of the World Cup, that there were a lot of great things, great headlines that we saw during the cup itself. You mentioned a couple of them. And there were a lot of very negative ones. Some of them had to do specifically with the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, but mostly the U.S. And some of them were more on FIFA itself, and you hear those kind of headlines every 4 years. And it's I think certainly some of the things, the trophy ceremony being one of them, and a certain somebody
Yep.
who decided to take center stage at said trophy ceremony certainly added a lot of color that was not welcomed by most, and not helpful and distracting, and certainly also added threw his weight around on the pitch as well with the Balogun
Right.
decision. But I wonder how much of that is like, we can get into all that, but I wonder how much of that is like hosting versus I don't know if that falls into the hosting category. But in terms of like the individual cities and the culture and people coming together and, communities and businesses that came to make something to make the world hopefully feel welcomed outside of apparently a Somali referee, and the Iranian team that were turned away by our federal government, and we have to wear that shame right on our chest. I think a lot of our local communities tried to do what they could to make up for it and give some sense of pride and some sense of welcoming. One of my favorite stories, you talked about the Tartan Army in Scotland and the Norwegian. You talked about the Orange Army and the Norwegians everywhere. We didn't mention them, but I think a lot about Kansas City and how they hosted and like really adopted the Algerian team. There was I think the University of Kansas or Kansas University's marching band came and like played their national anthem for them at their practice facility, and there were random neighborhoods in Kansas City that Kansas City, Missouri is pretty far from Algeria, both figuratively and literally and culturally and in every way. Yet people were adopting Algeria as their team and trying to make the people who traveled, the fans, the team, feel welcomed. And I a lot of what I saw personally was that. Of course, again, we have to hold both of those things, both of the effects in our head. So again, pride is a tough thing, but I think I'm proud of the way that most people in our country seem to welcome the world, and I'm not proud of the very, very pointed and loud ways that our government and governing bodies made people feel less welcomed, which is a kind
Sure.
way of putting it.
I have sort of arrived at this opinion that I think the World Cup was a success in so many ways. However, I think it was a success in spite of the organization often.
I think that's fair.
There were a number of changes to the literal rules, but also to the culture of international football that I think the rules will probably stay. The culture will probably, reflexively come back. I don't think that will be fixed. I don't think we're ever going to see World Cup rings in the 2030.
Sure. But in the same way that there's always local flavor that stays
I agree.
at certain cups.
Yes, I completely agree. And what we'll talk about later on is like the legacy of this World Cup. And when in 15 or 20 years' time, when we reflect on the then previous 3 or 4 World Cups, what came from this one that will stay? And there are a number of things that will be celebrated as having happened for the first time in the American, Canadian, and Mexican World Cup. I think the power of football has been realized by more people than ever, especially more people in a market that previously did not fully recognize or engaged with football, especially globally. Despite having previously hosted a World Cup, I think there was sort of a generational break there. And now that the biggest stars have arrived to America, I think it was, unavoidable. And I want to say, like, the American fans, the local communities, as you said, I think did themselves so proud. That extends especially both to the Canadian and Mexican host cities. The immense pride that Mexican football fans must have felt watching games at the Azteca, and the immense dignity with which the Canadian Football Association conducted themselves when harboring and sort of providing, safety to the referee that you mentioned earlier, and some of the teams that are from nations that are on like flight restrictions to the US, I think was also incredible. The changes that will move forward, I think, like the expanded format with the 48 teams, that is here to stay. I don't think that is an American legacy necessarily. I think the 48 team World Cup has only been made possible by hosting it in a modern, westernized group of nations who have literally the capacity to host a 48 game World Cup. And if it expands to 64, I think that will severely limit the number of different countries that can host future World Cups. I think, we will see probably smaller nations that are excluded, which is a real shame, unless they sort of band together in these joint bids like we're seeing in the 2030 World Cup. Also, I think people are very quick to point the finger at the US, Canada, and Mexico for a heightened commercialization that wasn't so apparent at previous World Cups. I think that's completely false. I think that's completely misplaced. The hydration break, for instance, was not invented for this World Cup. We had cooling breaks at the Qatar World Cup. The only difference in America was American. I don't know if other networks around the world. I know the BBC and ITV did not show.
It was just Fox, because like Telemundo
that
even
showed commercials.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Canada's broadcast, but I know the at least the Spanish language American broadcast didn't. I hadn't heard about
Wow.
other
See,
broadcasters doing it around the world, taking commercials.
I've heard this from friends of mine. I've heard it on other podcasts who are sort of outraged at the hydration break. It was not invented for this World Cup. Again, as I said, it was present in the Qatar World Cup. I think actually what happened more this year was because they were better defined and we knew about them ahead of time far better than we did in Qatar. It's unlikely that we'll host many more World Cups in warmer weather, warmer climates. The 2034 World Cup will be hosted in Saudi Arabia, so I'm sure that will be a Winter World Cup. But the hydration break, or as we call it in Qatar, the cooling break, already existed, and the progression that we now see the game, especially at this elite international level, as being played in quarters, is not an American design.
No, it's
It
not. I think the context though is where people take the kind of the blame from, because it and make it kind of feel like, oh, this is an American thing, and associating it so much with
Sure.
America because of everything else that we'll get into about the the over commercialization, that kind of thing, which again has been a thing with FIFA. That's FIFA trying to maximize its revenue on
Of course.
on this stage. But like when you take it with the new ticketing pricing structure and the exorbitant costs for the for local transit places, which again, that's not like the US's fault. That's not even local communities' fault. That's actually FIFA refusing to subsidize
Uh-huh.
the transit. But anyway, I think it kind of just went into this like broader snowballing narrative that, a little bit of a sky is falling narrative about how out of
Yeah.
control the kind of money grubbing kind of aspects of it, which, certainly part of that is real. Like there are real cost effects on people trying to go to games, but I think that kind of rolls in with the hydration breaks and kind of makes that narrative spiral a little bit.
I agree.
Yeah, it's always interesting. There's a really a longtime sports media reporter named John Arand, who he kept talking about kind of in the lead up to and after the World Cup, about how with these major 4-year events, and he's talking about the World Cup and the Olympics, the men's World Cup and the Olympics, the because of what they have become, because of the commercial behemoths they have become, and again, not absolving anything here, but they have so much inertia to them, and they're so bloated that there's so many stories that there's so many stories that come out in the lead up to these events that are like sky is falling events. These
Yeah,
aren't gonna work. Like I think back to the Milan Olympics just 2 years ago, where you had the or 2 years ago. Sorry, two like a
that
few
was
months
this year.
ago. 2 years ago, a few
Yeah.
months ago. That the ice hockey arena wasn't completed until like right
Yeah.
before, which like again, not absolving these things, not saying they're not problems, but you hear about ticketing. Oh, you're gonna have empty seats at the World Cup. Massive games are gonna be, have massive empty sections. That didn't happen. Again, not saying it's a good thing, but you often have these kind of narratives that lead people to kind of build it up even more in their heads.
So that brings us back to the format for today's episode, which is I remember distinctly sending you articles and videos about, real grass turf being laid within like a couple of weeks of the World Cup. And, you know, the sensationalist, the clickbait article is like, the ball's not bouncing. This is going to be the World Cup, the worst World Cup ever. Everything was fine.
Yeah.
The way that the sport was actually delivered was kind of perfect. There was no there were no uh complaints. Every
This
stadium
is
was
like the
actually
fundamentals of the sport. We're not talking about like officiating. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about
no,
like
no,
the
exactly. Yeah,
ball.
yeah.
The ball was not the Jabulani. The turf was not, falling apart at the seams.
Yeah.
The sport
Oh,
worked. There weren't a ton more
the
injuries than normal. Sorry.
no, exactly, exactly. The number of games that were interrupted by like thunder and electrical storms actually kind of minimal given the breadth of the area covered by this competition. I think that was actually fine. That was perfectly
That felt
okay.
very
What?
lucky, but yeah, it was that. Yeah, that
Yeah,
was
but
a. I thought that would be way more
um,
of an effect too.
so beyond that, there are certain expectations I have from, and we'll talk about this briefly, from like the sporting element. I think the expanded 48 teams, I really wasn't a fan when it was announced. I thought, why would you mess with a good thing? The 38 or wherever we were, 32 was wonderful. Please don't break something that we love already. You add, the FIFA added a whole new round to the entire procession, which adds strain on the bodies of these athletes who have already played as many as 60 games already this season. People were worried about that, and I think before the World Cup it was hard to see where the payoff was. Now it's happened, wouldn't trade it for the world. Watching Cape Verde, watching Curacao, watching oh bless, who was that? The other small team who played in blue, Scotland. These all of these smaller nations that don't typically make it to the World Cup having their moment and delivering, except for Scotland, delivering on their promise and their opportunity of a lifetime. That was amazing. I would never ever trade watching that Cape Verde Argentina or Cape Verde Spain game. The two finalists both couldn't get past Cape Verde in normal time. Incredible. I didn't know where Cape Verde was a month ago. And now I think I'm a Blue Sharks fan. It's so wonderful. And honestly, this was the World Cup to do it, where you have the infrastructure, everyone gets to play in these absolutely enormous stadiums with all of the eyes of the world on you. Yeah, that's an area, that's a specific example where I think this World Cup being hosted by the US, Canada, and Mexico was perfect. This is the ultimate cauldron, the ultimate situation to birth these new and radical ideas, which I think a lot of people were resistant to. I would actually support a 64 team World Cup for the next one. If we're going to have more moments like that, you can do it in a way that doesn't, um, put too much strain on Gianni Infantino, who is second to Darth Vader in terms of just maximum evil vibes.
It's
He
crazy
said
how much
in an
he.
interview after. Go on.
Sorry, I was just gonna say it's crazy how much he has like retroactively made us forget how terrible Sepp Blatter was. Like,
Oh
like
God, yeah.
Gianni is so like wildly like just loathed by so many that people forget about Sepp Blatter. Sorry,
Sepp Blatter was horrendous,
continue.
and I'd take him back in a heartbeat. But Gianni said,
I don't know about
Gianni
that.
Infantino said that he was like, oh, we'll see about 64. They'll definitely do 64. It's so much more revenue. Remember, FIFA only makes money every 4 years. FIFA only makes operating budget on years when it hosts the World Cup, and normally it makes. I think it's the Russian World Cup it made like 4 billion, and at Qatar it tried this we can check. At Qatar, like the target was closer to 5. The US World Cup, I think they were expecting to make $9 billion, which is like their operating budget plus 40% over what they were using before. So if there's an opportunity to expand this product, people will still pay for it, and you do it on a centenary World Cup next time, yeah, I can fully see 64 coming. And yeah, I don't think people are going to be as opposed to it as before. Um, okay, so my expectations there were elevated. I think our winners and losers, we got to say, I think probably a very strong goodbye to some of world football's best protagonists. If we see the likes of Messi and Ronaldo at another World Cup, I think we will all be shocked, and they will be far less. I think their shine will be dimmer. Just before we move on from the sporting side of it, did your personal expectations for the US men's national team exceed where where the US made it to? Were they met? Were you slightly disappointed? How sort of and do you think if you can extrapolate that to the nation as a whole? I know that's a
I
hard
speak for the
ask, but
entire United States of America. Yes.
I'm
Um,
afraid, Adam, in this format, you
That's
absolutely
true.
do.
Yeah, I say that like in jest, but that's kind of half the premise of this show. Not that I don't know. It's not. But no, the I would say personally, and I'd like to think I fall in the in kind of the same place as the general public did. Um, I'd say exceeded expectations by a little bit, if not just met them. I think the
Yep.
round of 16 was always like a really solid target that I don't think was ever felt like it should have been out of reach. That said, a little bit disappointed by how strongly out of the gate we came. And then, we felt like we had all the momentum, and then, you know, Trump gave Belgium all the bulletin board material that they needed to just be absolutely laser focused on taking us down. Which, like, of course, the round of 16, like, why, like, of course they're going to be focused on it, but any extra edge doesn't hurt. And I genuinely think it's the second time Trump's ruined a great sports story this year. One of them was Nixon 4, and number 2 was the USMNT bowing out to Belgium, and finally could have gotten over the hump. I felt like of the U.S.'s futility against kind of major European nations. All due
Sure.
respect to Bosnia and Herzegovina, but yeah, I feel like that's how I feel, and I genuinely from what I heard from friends, what I saw from people that know the game well, that follow this team and this program, it feels like that's pretty reflective, I'd say.
Cool.
And then
I
you're
think
just once again always the bridesmaid, never the bride. At least in terms of recent history of semifinals.
We recorded. I know it's in the episode, but we recorded our last episode less than 2 hours after England had been knocked out of the World Cup, and my depression showed slightly. Now that we're removed from it, I actually think we came exactly where we were supposed to. I'm actually third place was kind of a nice bonus. We have lost the semi-final recently. England has made it to 3 World Cup semi-finals, and 2 of them happened in my lifetime. That is something I'm very grateful for. I think that's where the ceiling for this team is, is realized. I'm actually shocked and a little bit disappointed that the bracket couldn't work out so that France would meet Spain in the final. That felt like the World Cup final when they were slogging it out because Argentina didn't. I don't think they deserved to be anywhere near that final. The final itself, and this is if you only watched the 2022 World Cup final, you'd have thought that all World Cup finals are amazing. They're normally awful. They're normally actually very poor quality football games because there's so much on the line, and typically it's like in this instance, it's 1 or 2 stars versus an incredible system who also happen to have some amazing footballers. Um, but yeah, in this case, it felt like the unstoppable force met the almost immovable object, and then that immovable object had a change of heart and completely self destructed partway through the second half.
Yeah. Now,
But yeah, we came personally, exactly as far as I thought we would, and I'm
okay.
actually very proud that we came third.
Well, good. I
No one will remember third place, but yeah, it's where we should have been.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, there'll be some footnotes about it, but I think I think you're in the I think definitely a fair feeling to have. Want to make sure that we don't spend too much time on the game
Sure.
itself because we promised we wouldn't do that, but I do want to get to you. We talked a little bit about Americanization. We've talked a little bit about the organization, kind of our general vibe. I think one thing both of us, I think it's safe to say both of us feel generally positively about the sporting and like just around the sporting, you know, uh, areas of this World Cup or aspects to this World Cup. Part of that, though, comes with something we've talked about a few times, which is sports washing, and is something that you put down on the agenda.
Mm.
And thinking back to at the beginning of this World Cup, when the headline is the Somali referee is not allowed to come into the U.S., you have it in the backdrop of, violent ICE raids and people still continuously getting killed by immigration enforcement and all sorts of, I'm not even going to say political problems, just like human rights issues. How does this fit into that as somebody, we would sit and talk about the Qatar World Cup as being an example of sports washing. I'm sure we'll talk about it with Saudi Arabia. How as somebody who's not American do you feel, but also has a deep love of America? How do you feel about that?
The previous 2 World Cups, regrettably, were absolutely used for sport washing. Qatar and Russia both had some pretty abhorrent uh, human rights and international image issues, which the power of football can steamroll. And for that brief 4 weeks, everyone, all eyes are on your nation, and you can dress it however you want, and you can project this alternate narrative for your nation where the problems are firmly swept under the rug. America wasn't supposed to, specifically the US. I don't think Canada or Mexico had nearly the same uh, image issue coming into this World Cup, but the United States is not a nation that needs to partake, or you would have thought would typically need to partake in sport washing. And what's crazy, and I felt this so strongly beforehand when we were talking about all of the organizational things, and tickets were tens of thousands of dollars for normal games, not even the final. There were you know horror stories about having to spend, as you said earlier, hundreds of dollars on transit. Hotels were going to be so expensive. This whole World Cup was going to look like it was so unbelievably inaccessible financially that it seemed like all of the previous two sport washing events had treated their fans comparatively so well compared to the nation that apparently didn't need to sport wash and were apparently treating its fans really poorly. And yet, the Omar Artan refusal was yet another layer on this. The image of this World Cup is becoming soiled and ruined. And fortunately, the footballing world's response to Artan's refusal entry has been amazing, and UEFA, I think, are going to make him one of like the core referees in the Champions League next year, which is a really nice response. And of course, Canada hosted one or two of his games as well. That was amazing, but it felt like the public image of the World Cup was deteriorating every minute we got closer to the game. By the time the first ball was kicked, it kind of felt like it needed sport washing. It needed, which is bizarre because we normally talk about sport washing in terms of fixing human rights issues, but in this case, it felt, although there are some deep rooted and systemic issues with the US regarding personal liberties at the moment. It felt like just relating to this event itself, the sport had to work harder to fix the image of its own competition. You know, th- I'm not sure the American image would have been enhanced or decreased if the World Cup didn't happen in America this year, because it really fell before we had what such an amazing event. And I think the power of football, and it sounds so kind of corny. It almost sounds like
Sounds like Disney.
what a character. It sounds like anime. It sounds like, oh, we're gonna come through with the power of football, and all of our friends are gonna group together, and everything's gonna be grand. The power of this event and the power of this game, with so many eyeballs watching, and I don't know, and I should have looked up how many people watched the final, but it is many, many times more than watch the Super Bowl, for instance. It is an incomparable number of fans watch this. That speaks to the legacy of the sport itself, that it can, the snake can stop eating its own tail in the tournament that's making its own problems. Um, I don't think, and maybe what's interesting is I'm pretty sure the World Cup was awarded to the US in Trump's first term, but but therefore presumably the bid was not an act of sport washing, on the assumption that Trump would probably win his second term. Right, if this was a plan, and I'm not saying that this is, and we won't go down this rabbit hole, but like the act of the World Cup bid by the US being so strong, the act of winning the World Cup bid by the US, could have been thought of as like a sport washing plan, but because of the fixed terms in the US, it would have been crazy for that administration to assume that they weren't going to win in 2020 and were going to win again in 24 to benefit from the sport washing in the way that the fixed authoritarian regimes in Russia and Qatar can guarantee that the World Cup bid will come to fruition in 8 or 12 years and benefit that nation and its public image. So I don't think we can really use the term sport washing in the macro, but in the micro, yeah, the World Cup had to work really hard to fix a lot of the problems it set up for itself in the months leading up to it. Now that is, I don't think I'm certainly don't think I'm alone in this view, but in the country, in one of the host nations, do you agree with that assessment? Um, do you think that's a bit blown out of proportion? Am I being a bit sensationalist?
No, I don't. I don't think you're being sensationalist. I think it's. I think it's hard to separate. It's always hard to separate like a country from its current ruler. I don't mean to say. I shouldn't say that because Trump isn't our ruler. He's our president.
Sure.
But like and I think there's obviously
Taylor
regard.
Swift is your ruler.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Beyonce is our ruler. It's like it's always like there's so many more stories than just him, and I think a lot of times just because of how much attention is brought onto any president, but or any world leader,
Mm.
I think so much of it can like be feels like it gets tied back directly to like a personality or something. But I I think in this case, like I think the way that you put it, like the separating the micro versus the macro is important, and it does kind of feel like a little sports washy in some like with some of those kind of individual stories, but I'm not sure if on a macro sense because I also think like this wasn't put on to try to make the image of the US any better or worse.
Completely agree.
It was put on to make money. And there's certainly a lot of things around the edges that make it that will shape narratives and shape how people feel about the event and presumably about any of the countries hosting. But I think we have to. I do not. If there's sports washing, I'm not sure it was like some grandmaster plan to do so. In fact, I'm
I
certain it
agree.
wasn't. So yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. But okay, I was interested in that because you put it on the put it on our rundown, and I thought it was an interesting piece. One other thing I want to definitely make sure that we have time for that you put down is a clash of sporting cultures and how this World Cup felt like it put a microscope on the uniqueness of American sporting culture versus other other sporting cultures throughout the world, and I think especially like American culture and UK culture that we talk about so often on this show. That is this show. It feels like this was a really great kind of a great way to bring those to the forefront.
The What's nice about this World Cup being hosted by three different nations is that you do see this interaction in three different lenses.
Yeah.
I think the Mexican sports culture is far more European than it is North American. And I think Canadian. I have a solid idea of where in that spectrum I'd put Canadian, but I think it's far closer to the US. What we saw with things like the Tartan Army descending on Boston was a beautiful confluence of like the purest supporter experiences that are so common actually between uh, European and American sports culture that we don't often give ourselves time to recognize. It's the fraternity and the passion, the love and the inquisitiveness that is actually common amongst like all sports fans, and it's nice to see different varieties and different like flavors of that interact. Like the was it the Wrigley Field? No, Fenway. Fenway Park
Yep.
hosting all of the Scottish fans,
Yeah, and you had
and
like it's the first time
they
it
sang the entire time. They
so
just sang
cool.
for like 9 hours.
So
Yeah.
cool. It's like that's like my
Um,
dream. That is like what like the fact that I wasn't in Fenway Park that day makes me so sad because like that is like exactly like that is everything that I would hope for at a baseball game. That's perfect.
Um, Also, I think a lot of there have been like I'm going to use the word conflicts, but obviously not. I don't mean like physical or violent. I mean like the clash of foot of different sports cultures that elevate both. This idea, this we had so many, especially on social media, we had so many people saying like the European mind cannot comprehend that MetLife Stadium, you cannot walk to MetLife Stadium. Yeah, you can. You actually can. You could. Lots of people did it. Lots of people did it to prove a point. You look at aerial photos of Arrowhead Stadium in Kansas, and you're like, "Ooh, I don't see any grass or any trees or any like
Yeah.
walkable streets for a mile or two radius." And uh, the what's another good example? I mean, yeah, we had a halftime show for the
Yeah.
first time. We had 5 different musical acts, and I think most of them sucked. And that's a projection. We had flybys, we had flyovers. Some people got really excited about that. Some people got rightly like scared of that.
Yeah.
These are fun, trivial instances where cultures butt against each other, and we actually kind of see the beauty in either. You know, there were obviously classic chants from Scotland. The Aussies had a really good tongue in cheek one about your ruler. Um, but I think that the clash of sporting cultures actually produced something more beautiful, which actually is always consistent with the World Cup and the Olympics. Less so in our continental cups, where I think there's a greater homogeny of European sports cultures that we see at something like the Euros. And also like at the Winter Olympics, as you said, Algeria having a second home in Kansas,
Yeah.
Morocco. The Moroccan fans were so well taken care of in in every city they went to.
I was
Go
just
on.
gonna say real quick, you haven't even touched the at the beginning of this thing when it was all getting started with the Knicks going to playing in the finals. You had like Brazilian and Moroccan fans in town all of a sudden getting caught up in all of the Knicks fever and seeing the parades in the streets for a sport that wasn't even part of the World Cup. So that was a fun kind of clash that happened. But you were about to ask a question.
No, I was just going to say, on the other side of that, are there any moments? And we're about to. I can hear the 2 minute warning question looming, and I've got two more things that I want to quickly
Okay.
press. So one of them is: are there any instances of that culture clash that you felt were particularly noteworthy? And then I would like your moment of the tournament, if you've got one. I haven't asked you to pre-prepare anything like this. So those are your two questions for you, Adam, to round us out. Where did you see a fun confluence of sports cultures, and what was your moment of the 2026 World Cup?
Um, I mean, I think it's again. I think it's got to be like, I genuinely think it's like the Knicks championship thing. I think that was my favorite one, partially because I saw it personally, and just seeing people in like Brazil shirts like dancing in the streets and being like, "Whoa, this is crazy." I don't watch the Knicks. I think it was really cool. So that was fun. Again, the Red Sox thing also happened with the Marlins too when the Tartan Army went south to Miami. But
Yeah.
and then what was your second part?
What was your moment of the World Cup?
Oh, my moment of the World Cup, like of the in general. I think it. I think it had to be the Cape Verde draw against Spain. Um, that was just,
Wow.
especially now that Spain's the champion. I think
Yeah.
it's too good to. That was such an
I
incredible game, such an incredible story, and it's so cool that we got to see it.
Adam, my moment of the tournament is Cape Verde versus Argentina.
Perfect.
It's really sweet that actually, they're the sweetheart, right? And specifically, the moment was Sydney Lopez Cabral's. I don't know if it's officially the goal of the tournament, but he scores from this silly angle from the edge of the box, stuns the holders, and he shares a pitch with the greatest footballer ever to live, and he runs off and celebrates with his girlfriend in the stands. It was incredible. What a moment from a player that probably realistically just by virtue of where he grew, like where he was born, may never have thought he was going to get the opportunity to play on the highest level. Scored an incredible goal, against the world champions. Um, I've got to say, the World Cup I think was actually wonderful, in spite of organizational problems, um, including some developments, some for the greater good, and some maybe that don't necessarily move the game forward.
Yep.
Um, it was wonderful to watch. I loved gorging myself on it. It became all encompassing, and I think it delivered on the sort of spectacle that we wanted and deserved. And nothing's perfect, and there were some real shortcomings and real disappointing moments, but ultimately, yeah, I loved it.
And we get to do
I
it
thought it
all
was
again.
fantastic.
And we get to do it all again in less than a year because we got the Women's World Cup.
Yeah, I can't
And
wait. The Women's World Cup's going to be fantastic.
I know I need it
And we,
as you like to say. I need it like my next breath because I'm so
we
ready for another international tournament. And such an awesome opportunity. Again, to hopefully roll in that momentum. It's staying in the hemisphere. It's the women's game is continuing to grow, and it's just I'm so excited.
I think we do. It's not important to talk about the winners of the World Cup. Spain were great and they were fine. They play amazing football. Blah blah blah. This is the first time ever that the men's and women's World Cup are held by the same nation, and will be for the next year.
That's that's pretty
That's kind of
incredible
cool.
that that's never happened. Although a
Now,
lot of that's because of our men's team. But anyway, I think it is officially time for the 2 minute warning, Harry, and it is my turn to ask you the question, or at least start off with the question. And that question this week is, what in air quotes unattainable world record would you like to see broken in your lifetime? Sporting world record. I realize I didn't specify that, but like if it's how many eggs can somebody eat in a minute, I I sorry, that doesn't count.
yeah, I want to watch Joey Chestnut just chow down on a record number of hot dogs. I imagine you're asking this because Josh Kerr smashed the mile world record in the
Indeed.
London Diamond League this year.
Indeed.
Incredible. I actually, I think that is a spectacular achievement. I was more impressed, and I felt like the 2 hour marathon record that we broke 2 months ago was actually a more seismic record broken. I think that was probably not more significant. There's no way of comparing them, but I really thought we were going to be stuck on 2 hour marathons for longer, and now I actually think records there will tumble. I would like an eighth drivers world championship would be cool.
There you go.
Break Schumacher's
There you
record.
go.
But other than that, I don't know. I think rather than records, I want to see more streaks coming to an end. I want to see more new teams finishing, trophyless droughts.
I like
I
that.
want to see diversity of success in sport more. Um, and you know what? If you'd asked me a week ago, I would have liked to send that 60-year wait for a World Cup end. But again, that's the record we're looking for. Adam, what's your answer, mate?
One of two. I would love to see the home run record, the all-time home run record fall in my lifetime, and I think it will.
Wasn't that on this year? Wasn't there someone who was tracking to do quite well this year?
I don't think so. Last year
I think
there
it was earlier. Oh, was it? Maybe it was
yeah,
last year.
last year we had kind of a good home run chase, but nobody's chased for the season, but nobody's chased the like home run record since Barry Bonds broke it back in 2007. But
What is the record?
it's 762.
And is this career?
Yeah, career. Yeah, career home run record.
Wow.
And then I would say either that or Usain Bolt's 100-meter time. I think it'd be cool to get lower than 9.58.
It's crazy that both of everything we've mentioned's happened in our lifetime.
Yeah. So yeah, we're asking we're asking records to be broken again. Actually, I actually think another cool baseball record that will never be broken, I'm almost certain of it, is the hit streak record. Joe DiMaggio got a base hit in 56 straight games, and nobody's really come close to that. There's been some people in the 40s, but like the number 40s, not decade. But anyway, all that said, that is the final whistle. And as always, really appreciate everybody watching and listening this week. We've gone 2 straight weeks with an episode, which is a lot tighter of a window than normally we record, but there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, wanted to make sure that we got in a World Cup retrospective while it was still somewhat fresh in our minds. And 2, because very excitingly, at least one of our next 2 episodes will be in person. Harry is coming to the United States in just less than a month, and we have plenty to prepare for. We're going to try to make a lot of fun things, and even if a lot of fun things just ends up being one long episode, think it will be a blast to do. Very excited to spend some time with my with as friends as well. But anyway, all that said, we will be on a little bit of more of a hiatus than normal this time, but don't you worry, we are coming back with a vengeance here once Harry is back out of our country in a little bit more than a month. That said, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit like, please give us a comment, and please subscribe. It really helps to grow the channel beyond our lovely audience that we have already, and we'd love more people that are sickos that are obsessed with the alternate with the country that they don't live in's sporting culture to hear this and see this podcast. So please do all that on YouTube. Follow us. Leave us a rating review on Spotify. Give us a comment. Follow along with us on Instagram and TikTok as well. Harry's still chugging along with the which American cities have the best named sports teams. As always, a very special thank you to producer Luke for our logo, and we'll see you next time.